Some leaders leave footprints, others leave libraries. You're tuning into the Authors on Mission podcast, where industry giants become literacy legends. In every episode, we talk with authors who turn their brilliance into books that transform lives. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, your host and Chief Creative Officer at Authors on Mission. Welcome to your authorship experience. Hello, and welcome to Authors on Mission, a podcast committed to delving into top-tier insights and strategies from established experts across domains, inspiring authors and empower you with the knowledge to succeed. Today's guest is Winifred Reilly, a marriage and family therapist with 45 years of experience and author of the groundbreaking book, It Takes One to Tango. She challenges the conventional wisdom, drawing on her extensive clinical practice and her own marriage to show how one determined partner can be a catalyst for transformative change. So get ready for a conversation that might just change how you think about your own relationships and writing in general. Without further ado, welcome to the podcast, Winifred.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's honestly such a pleasure. We love having many different types of authors on, whatever the different genres are. And I'm really excited to see, your take on, the whole relationship aspect of it all, but also the writing process too. So it's going to be really insightful for our listeners. I think so for sure. So I'd love to just begin with, if you don't mind telling us a little bit more about yourself and what got you into the writing world.
Well, okay, so I've been a marriage and family therapist for about 45 years, and I started out actually just doing sort of individual work with people, and I happened to sort of stumble into becoming a specialist in relationships by going to a workshop. I needed some continuing education credits, and so I went to this workshop, which was called Thriving and Surviving with Your Difficult Couples. And I thought, okay, that ought to be fun. Every couple I work with is really difficult. And what I discovered was that I was not only embarking on a journey to transform the work that I was going to be doing for the rest of my career, but I was going to tackle my own marriage with the information that was coming to me through this training. And by 10:30 in the morning, I was like, I'm in for it. I really have to create change. I have to change myself. I have to have a different kind of marriage. At that point, I was married around 10 years. So I decided, I certainly didn't start writing a book then, but a number of years later, I began to see that the kinds of things that were written about marriage really were not addressing a very key question, which was marriage is hard. Relationships are hard. All the books were like 10 things that you should do, or, how to feel beloved, or get everything you want, and stuff like that. And it was so discouraging to me as I was struggling to figure out how to have a really vital, healthy marriage with a very decent guy, but we were kind of these kind of people. And so I decided that what was really needed was a book that talked about how on the ground you actually fix your marriage. And I discovered that how you fix your marriage is by taking yourself on, looking at what you want, where you want to take risks, what you want to change in yourself. Everybody comes into therapy thinking that their partner, I'm going to change their partner. And it's actually that people have to begin to see, what's my part? What do I do? So even from the very first session, when people come in, I don't look at the couple and say, what do you want? I say, how can I help you? And then I turn to the other person, and how can I help you? And what each person needs help with is not the same. And so that is why I wrote this book, because people needed a book that said, basically, here's what to do before you go crazy, essentially.
Well, first off, thank you for sharing that whole journey with us. I think it's always important when an author writes about something that's meaningful to them, but at the same time inspires change in others and really helps them, right? You found a need that had to be filled pretty much through your own experiences.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
It just goes to show, and it was not only written with a concept in mind, but passion as well, because it's something that was near and dear to you.
Absolutely, yes.
So I guess I'm curious to know about sort of the writing process itself. All these tips and strategies, how did you, come up with these? Did it involve your husband at all? Or would you say it was mainly you and your research? I'm very curious.
Well, so I had a broad theoretical background in family therapy and family systems and marriage and what works and what doesn't work. And as I was putting my philosophy together, I was testing, does this really work, by working my own marriage? So he was in on the writing process only in that because he is a key player in the book. I needed to say, how do you feel about my talking about this? How do you feel about, what do you think about that? But really, this was my project, and the whole transformational work on the relationship began with me, but it actually ended with both of us working together, hence the one to tango idea. And so, but the book started out as a series of stories, and I had about 90,000 words. And,
Oh, wow.
and I was bored by the book. It just was missing something. And then the person who I had studied with for many years died suddenly. And I decided I needed to incorporate what I had learned from him. And then I realized that I was going to write a book about the learning process, about how I became a couples therapist and what I learned. So the book is about my training, my couples, and myself. And so that shaped the book. And then the writing process became much more streamlined. I wouldn't say it was easy. Writing a book is not easy. So my advice to people is, when you figure out what you want to write about, spend many, many, many months writing it, your table of contents, writing your outline. Now, it's probably different for a nonfiction book or a memoir than a novel, but even my friends who write novels, they have walls with charts and timelines and names and descriptions. But the outline, I worked with somebody, I hired someone to go over the whole thing, and we made a concise outline. Not one of those ones with the, Roman numerals. It was, what's the thrust? What do I want to communicate? What are the key points? And then the book had a shape.
Right. Yeah. So first off, I definitely agree with the fact that you need to have that outline, right? That's what really, I think, streamlines the whole process once you know what you're actually going to write. And you're right.
It's what's going to follow this is going to follow that. It's going to follow that.
Exactly. Yeah. It stops you from going on tangents, from writing, 90,000 words of stories that maybe, you don't need everything.
Right.
But it also kind of, makes sure that you can get it done, right? I have so many authors who I work with who, they might have started their book just typing whatever came to mind, but
Right.
then it's kind of like, then when's it going to stop? When's your end? What's the thesis of your book, right?
Yeah. So the outline was a miracle. It took us 4 months of hard work to put together the outline. And then each chapter pretty much followed the outline. We had very few alterations. She was super. She was a great editor. And so she really helped me, because I'd never written a book. I could write an article, but I couldn't write a book.
So what was that outlining stage like for you, being that you started writing? So what did it take to kind of, you mentioned you brought that you had 90,000 words and you had an outline after the fact.
So, what she told me when she read the 90,000 words, well, actually, not even all those 90,000 words ended up in the manuscript that I ultimately used. But she said, even then, she said, a third of this we're going to throw out, a third of this we're going to keep, and a third of this we're going to rewrite. And so she saw the whole arc of the book. What's going to go where do I need to begin? What do I need to say? And then she kind of threw me to the wind. She didn't write this book for me. I'd say, okay, I'm going to work on chapter 1. And then I would send her chapter 1 and she'd have a million comments. Then I would go back at it. Then we would go to chapter 2. And my agent was also an exceptional editor. She was very, very exacting. She would say, this metaphor is boring, fix it. And that is, this is already, everybody already has said that. What do you want to say that's different? So I was challenged all along.
Well, it's very clear then that you really relied on the support team, between your editor and your agent, and then also your husband too, who you were bouncing ideas back and forth off of.
Yes, he was a good reader. Oh, here's another thing. I was in a writer's group, It
Oh,
really, really helped. At that point, many of us were actively writing a book, and we met every other week for 3 hours for about 5 years.
wow. I could only
Yeah,
imagine the community that comes out of that for five
yeah,
years too. Within
yeah,
the time
yeah.
span, out of curiosity, did many of you complete those books and still?
So I completed mine. Somebody is still working on hers. Somebody else has published 4 novels. Somebody else self-published. And another person has done amazing things. Her book was actually turned into a children's book, and also some theater company in England is producing some part of it. So we did well.
That's really impressive and also just like heartwarming, right? Like a group of writers all getting together and talking about their ideas, supporting each other. To anybody listening today, I think that's definitely just another piece of advice you should take home with you. You can't do it on your own. You can, but
It's
most people,
lonely.
yes,
And
yes, what
you and it's lonely anyway. Had a full-time clinical practice at that point, and I worked all week, and then I spent all weekend writing. And my husband would say, "Okay, time to take a walk. Here's some lunch." And otherwise, I just wrote all the time.
Well, I know what that's like for sure. Sometimes when I get into it as well, whether it's my own writing or for a client or even editing projects, I get so zoned in, and before you know it, it's nighttime.
Okay. Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, no, would you agree then that like any writer then should definitely just find that community? They need someone to support. It seems like
It's
it really
just
benefited
too,
you.
yeah, it's just too much. There are people, if you're Hemingway, you can go sit in your cabin and write 5 hours a day. But still, somebody has to read your stuff. And you have to be the kind of person who has the capacity for someone to say, this part doesn't make sense. I mean, there was a terrible moment where I submitted 2 chapters to my agent, and she said, these are terrible. Like, these have lost their way. There's something missing here. And I knew it. And my editor was like, oh, yeah, I could see. At that point, I was under a deadline. I already had a contract. I had to produce the manuscript by the 31st of December.
Oh wow. Okay. So you
Yeah,
definitely were. I guess
under
like
it.
where the pressure comes from, right? Like just the need to
Yeah,
put something down and figure out something that
yeah. And it
maybe
had to
works
be
better under
really
that
good.
pressure.
That wasn't really that fun. That little chapter 7 and 8 was not that much fun, but I was determined, and I had to do it. You don't actually mess around when the publisher says your manuscript is due on the 31st of December. You have it
You
ready.
make it happen,
You
right?
make it happen.
So, speaking of, the book itself, I think we should dive into a little bit more of the content
Okay.
in It
Okay.
Takes One to Tango. Now, it's interesting because, looking at the title of it, it takes one to tango. Obviously, the common saying is it takes two to tango. I actually misspoke when I was talking to you earlier before we were
Right.
recording.
Yeah.
So, what led you to focus on the power of one partner rather than two?
Well, conventional wisdom says that it takes two, and people's therapist says if your partner doesn't want to join in the effort, it's like there's nothing to do. And so what that does is that leaves the more motivated partner or more frustrated partner waiting for something that isn't going to happen and believing that change is not possible. If you think about ecology, you think about like a polluted lake. When you clean up one part of the lake, it starts to change the whole ecosystem. And so it is with systems theory, that when you want to change a system, we're not changing your partner, you're changing the role you play in your relationship system. And for most people, it's not 50-50. Oh, we're supposed to meet in the middle, and we're supposed to agree, and we're supposed to compromise, and that's what a good relationship is. But actually, it's never that way. Sometimes it's 60-40, and sometimes it's 90-10. And sometimes someone's partner is too discouraged, or doesn't believe in therapy, or thinks everything's fine as it is. And so, the partner who has an idea for change, that's how change happens. One person has a good idea and wants to go about seeing if it can happen. Someone's going to invent electricity. One person is going to decide it's time to tackle a big problem. One person. And that's how change occurs. And so the idea that it takes one to tango isn't encouraging for the point that just, you can't think that you're going to be in tandem, or you have to just sit on the sidelines or lower your expectations. People don't want to feel stuck like that. I like it's a leadership model. It's an empowering idea that you can actually take action.
Yeah. First off, I like the way that you take that different approach too, because you're right. If you just don't do anything, you're sitting there and waiting for that other partner to make a move or to whatever it might be, clean their laundry, right? It's never going to work. So you do have to take that initiative. So it's great to know that you not only rolled with that, but you have, studies behind that, proven actionable steps to take, which only further, makes it even better.
Yes, and it's tried and true. People discover that when they make a change, when they take an action, things are different. Sometimes I like to use this example. If you're baking a cake and you put in a cup of this and your partner puts in a cup of that and you put in a cup of this and you stir this in, you make the same cake all the time. But if I add some different ingredients, we have a different cake. And people are like, well, I do this and he does that and she does that and they do this and that, and I don't like that cake. And we just keep baking the same cake. Well, bake a different cake. Put some different things into it. I mean, that is really kind of how it works.
Yeah, I love that metaphor too. Like a great way to just make it, grounding into something everybody can picture and understand. I'm sure your book also includes a lot of those kind of metaphors. Would I be correct in
Yeah. It really is a story. It's hardly a self-help book, but they didn't know how to classify it. Is it a memoir? Is it a self-help book? And they decided to classify it as an unconventional memoir.
Understood. Well, I like that though, because the story is always what engages the reader most, right? They see themselves in the shoes of the characters or whatever the topic might be. So that being said, being that, you mentioned couples get stuck in cycles, rehashing the same conflicts in many ways. How can that one partner break that cycle constructively?
Well, I was trying to think of simple examples where it's the kinds of things that create change. As I said earlier, I asked, what can I help you with? What can I help you with? And the kinds of things people say, I lose my temper, or when my spouse loses her temper, I escalate, or I fold up, or I don't know what to do when we have conflict and I just freeze, or I can't stand it, my partner withdraws and like freezes me out for days. I don't know what to do. And so I work with people about, what do you want to change in you? Pay more attention to yourself and less attention to your partner. And the kinds of things people want to change are things like, I wish that I could take a stand. I'm afraid to ask for this. Or whenever I bring up the subject of money, we have a fight. Or, I'd really like to do something more novel in sex, but my partner is, it just gives me a funny look and then I get scared. But then I just feel kind of like a wuss and I don't like that. And so sometimes people need to be more generous. Sometimes people need to be more, have more self-respect. Sometimes they need to control some behavior. Sometimes they need to take risks. And so each person has their work to do. And so, examples of change are, someone has a partner who they go out to dinner and that person pretty much drinks too much wine and insists on being the driver. And so for years, that person sat in the passenger seat, like holding on to the door handle, being afraid. And then one day she said, I'm just not going to do that anymore. And it really began a whole conversation about the ways in which she's afraid to challenge her partner and the ways in which she would, felt terrible that she would put herself at risk and that she would let her kids be in the car. And it broke open the whole conversation about, how do we influence each other? It's a big theme in people. I'd like to be able to influence you. And if I can't, what am I going to do? Am I going to shut down? Am I going to try and overpower you? So that's the kind of thing. What am I going to do? I ask people, what do you already would like to see happening differently? in your relationship, and what steps would you have to take?
Got it. Yeah. First off, I like the way that you did ask people exactly what can I help you with. And that's kind of what formulated these theories, because that not only shows you what your readers need to hear, but also sort of the common topics that everybody else feel connected to and they need to learn from.
Yeah,
Sorry for
yeah.
my
And
mis.
there, yeah, it's not actually that complicated. We have a thing that we long for. We want something, and we're afraid to rock the boat. We're afraid to risk disapproval. We're afraid to evoke our partner's anger. We're afraid that we're going to hurt their feelings. They're sensitive. We can't actually ever say, could you do something differently? But then I don't like tiptoeing around. And so I say to people, what, you know, what part of yourself are you not occupying? What happens to you in the presence? How do I deal with my relationship under pressure? What do I do? Do I escalate? Do I retreat? Do I blank out? Do I fall apart? How do I want to be a whole and solid person in relation? I like to use this little hand thing, which is like if I'm leaning on you for approval, or I'm afraid of you, I'm standing like this. But if I'm on my own 2 feet, we can actually be really a lot closer to each other, because the goal is to have a thriving, loving, connected relationship where I trust myself, I feel good, I appreciate you, I feel like we are a good team.
Yeah. So I guess the end of the day, one of the main things is just to not be afraid, right? Just, if something doesn't feel right, make a change and just kind of put your best step forward. Just like
Yeah,
the
and it
example of the
takes
woman.
absolutely, yes. But it takes a lot of work to get to that place, because I could say to people, look, it's really simple. Just take a stand solidly on your feet. Don't be afraid of anything. Be willing to step out of your comfort zone. Like I could give them all of that stuff, but how to walk there is really, it's slow steps. It's finally saying, I don't agree with you. I worked with someone whose spouse was always complaining that he didn't love her enough, and that he didn't do enough, and he didn't show his affection for her enough, and that she felt like he wasn't a good husband. And it just always made him feel really kind of beaten down. And then one day he came in, he says, something really amazing happened. One day it just occurred to me that she wasn't right about me. She wasn't right. And I said to her, listen, I'm a good husband. I feel good about, I do these things. And I actually think that your unhappiness is more general. And I don't think it's about me. And I really hope that you will look at that, because I know I'm actually showing up in a way that I feel good about. And it was really shocking to her, and she took it to heart. Not everybody gives you a parade when you make a move like that. Sometimes your partner is not very happy about it, but you have to stay firm and not get all wobbly and lose sight of who am I really and what matters to me. And sometimes what your partner says about you is actually not accurate, and you have to actually figure it out. Sometimes they are accurate and you don't want to hear it, but you have to be able to discern.
So, that being said, I guess I'm curious, what did happen with that couple? Did they work through that, or was that?
Oh yes. Oh yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Despite all of the stuff where people say, oh, 50% of marriages fail, which is actually not true. 1/3 of first marriages fail. And as you go into second, third, fourth, and fifth, it kind of becomes much more often that those marriages, and that's not a given. But so let's say 1 out of 3 marriages fail. Sometimes it's because they don't have tools. The world of couples therapy is not always helpful. There's a kind of way in which people think, if I just tell you like what the components are of a good marriage, you're just going to be able to do that. So people actually have to grow. I really think of the work at marriage and the work on marriage is like a growing machine, and people are challenging themselves and taking things on. And what happened with that couple was they had a couple of back and forths. It was not like, oh, honey, thank you so much for taking a stand and really confronting my blind spot. I mean, that's like a fantasy on like some movie where it's got to end up in 2 hours. But really, he changed how he was standing in relation to her. And it's like Velcro, like if the stuff doesn't stick, it doesn't stick anymore. And he had changed how he saw himself in relation to her. And she actually started to pay more attention to what was going on for her.
Got it. Yeah. So it's important to know that, even when you do take these first steps, anybody listening today, it's not going to be a quick process. It's not like flipping a switch. You make the decision and then boom, the results happen.
And your partner is like thrilled to hear from you about the ways in which you have been afraid to talk. No, it doesn't happen. But it really is a process of courage and clarity and self-confrontation, because sometimes people come in and they start out, how can I help you? Well, my partner, is so angry all the time. Okay, well, what would you like me to help you with about that? And then they hadn't thought about, oh, is there something, so it's not just get my partner to stop being angry. Well, what happens to you when your partner is angry? And what do you do? What would you like to do instead? What would that feel like? What part of that is scary? And then all of a sudden the person's working on themselves in relation to whatever the thing is.
Understood. Okay. Well, first off, I think all these tips are incredible. And anybody listening today, please apply it to your own lives as well. Maybe it's, a huge issue, maybe it's a smaller thing, right? But these tips can be applied to whatever it is that you might be facing in your own relationships, romantically and in other relationships as well. Would you agree that these could also be?
Oh yeah. I mean, at work, the stakes are different because the power situation at work is different, where like you can't, walk up to your boss necessarily and say, I'm really tired of blah, blah, blah. But it's important to be able to be clear and ideally to be able to talk to people about what really matters and what's of value to you and how you would like your organization to operate.
Understood. Well, there we go. Thank you. And I'm glad, one thing is really important is that this framework then it resonates with many people, whatever walk of life you're in, and also whatever you are feeling challenged by in your own lives. So that's an amazing thing I'm sure has really touched a lot of readers. My next question then is, what kind of feedback have you received from this book, and what kind of points seem to resonate the most with your readers? And what type of points would you say?
I actually have been delighted by the response. One piece of advice that I do have for authors is if you are working with a publishing house, they don't do nearly as much publicity as they say that they will or that you hope they would do, and you really have to be active. I've done lots of podcasts and talks. I've generated a lot of my own notice. I wrote a blog, and the response that people have is, I'm so relieved that I'm not the only person struggling, and I'm so relieved that there's something I can do. I love my partner, and my partner doesn't want to do therapy, or my partner is leaning out of the relationship and feels like, it's too hard, and I really want to make it a go, but I don't know how. So I wrote like about 50 blog posts over the time when I was actively blogging, and the most read blog post was what to do when one partner is leaning out and you want the relationship. Like phenomenal. I mean, we're talking like 10 times the readership. And what people like about the book is there's something that they can do besides give up or lower their standards or complain. And that's the point that really has resonated. I really loved being on the radio and being out there and talking to people and giving talks. I still love it. It feels like a subject that everybody can use some help with.
Right. Well, that's good to know. And this kind of goes along with what I said before, is that everybody can feel the power behind what you're saying and that wisdom. They can apply it to whatever it is that's needed in their own life. So, yeah. And I really appreciate that you've been able to share that with us. And now that the book's been out, would you say that, you've heard all this great feedback from them? Have you been using the book ever since in other areas of your life, perhaps speaking engagements or?
Well, I did a book tour initially, and then I have done a lot of talks and gone to like some, health spa kind of places and been a speaker. And the thing about the book is that it's fun. It really is fun to read. It's, I try and keep it sort of personal and lively, and I can laugh at myself, and I could laugh at how challenging it is to be a couples therapist. And it really is a story that unfolds, and so you can watch the arc of my training, all the ways I'm learning, and then what my couples are learning. And then in the end, it's, what kinds of things people can do. And so, I'm surprised. My book is out 7 years and it's still selling. And every week somebody sends me, at least one person will send me an email with a question. Some people will say, can you do therapy with me? Or, but mostly I can't work outside California, but I will help people when they've read the book. I will do 2 hours of coaching with you to help you figure out what the thing is that you need to work on and what the steps are. And then people can go out there and do it. And the other thing is I'm just at the beginning of creating a self-help course that I'm going to put together that people can buy, where they can actually kind of put this whole concept to work with action steps and so forth.
Well, that's amazing to know that, not only everybody listening can you pick up the book and learn from it, but you can also be on the lookout for that course on the future. I know you're working on it, so maybe it's, too pressuring to ask, but do you happen to know when that would be available? Or maybe we just need to stay tuned?
6 months.
About 6 months? Awesome. Cool.
Yeah.
Great. So
if I'm really lucky and some miracle occurs, it'll be sooner. But once I get it written, then there's all the kind of the technology involved and the marketing involved. But it's coming.
That's amazing to know. And so if anybody does want to, stay in the loop and check it out, or even, reach out to you, like you said, many people do, how can they get in touch?
Well, my website is my name, winifredreilly.com. I suggest people check out my blog, even though I haven't written in a while. Every now and again, it occurs to me I might post something, but there's 50 articles there, and the blog is called speakingofmarriage.com. And I have articles all over. Huffington Post published some of my stuff. And so you can Google me and get all kinds of stuff, lots of podcasts, interviews, things like that. But how to get in touch with me is you can find me through my website.
Perfect. So we're going to include those links in the description box of this podcast. Be sure to check it out, everybody. Maybe wait for the podcast to be done before you actually go ahead and click those links. But either way, you'll be able to get connected right away to Winifred if you're interested in hearing more about this really powerful book and the teaching behind it. Now, I'm curious, we are beginning to wrap up a little bit here, but I'd like to touch a little bit more on the writing process of you, because there's always a huge balance between sharing personal experiences with maintaining professional boundaries and also just getting information across in a way that's going to help your readers. So how did you strike that balance, and did you find that challenging? And would you offer any advice for others?
Yeah, so there's a funny line about, I think it was Anne Lamott. She said she writes a lot about her family and her history. It was in her novels and in her nonfiction. And she said, if they had wanted you to speak beautifully about them, they would have treated you better in the past. And it's sort of like your life is your story. So if there are people out there who are writing memoirs, you need to tell the truth about it. But, if you're going to tell your story, you have to tell your story. Now, as a therapist, there's all this theoretically, you're not supposed to share anything about yourself, and it's all, However, when talking about marriage, the thing that I find, and actually many of my colleagues, people, writers who do a lot of presenting, you have to talk about yourself as part of the same thing. Because if you come across like, well, of course I have this whole thing handled, and here are the things that you can do so that you could be miraculous like me. It's not going to help people. But when you find out, yeah, God, when this happens, I go crazy too. But I remember on that very first morning, on that very first training that I did with a person who Ellen Bader, I ended up studying with her for 7 years after that day. But she started her talk disclosing that after many years of work, she and her husband could go to the Grand Canyon and neither one of them was afraid the other one was going to push them off. And my first feeling was, oh my God, I can't believe she actually said that. And then I realized that's the point. The point, it was her first sentence. The point is, we are all trying to do this thing and we all find it challenging. And here's a roadmap. Here's a roadmap for your journey. And so my book is not a tell-all. It really isn't a memoir. It talks about the struggles my husband and I had. He's messy and I'm not as perfectly punctual. And that pretty much is the only things that we have ever fought about in variations. He's always trying to hurry me and I'm always trying to get him to clean more stuff up or to fix that or, and we've had to learn, because that's what people have to learn. We're different. They're two different people. We have to learn what to do with our differences. And so the personal aspect, I think, is crucial, because it would be ridiculous for me to say, yeah, we worked it all out and we'll never have another conflict again. Like, really? Like you got to be kidding. I want to be believable.
Yeah, no, I'd say that to my listeners and to my authors all the time. You can't just say like life's perfect, this is how I got here, like sunshine and rainbows, because
it's not interesting.
Yeah, it's not interesting and no one's going to believe it and they're not going to want to listen to you. Do you really want to take
and
advice?
There's nothing to learn.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, don't we all learn from the things that we don't know how to do at first? I mean, I learned how to write a book. Now I actually, if I ever decide I'm going to do it again, I actually know how to start. I know what it takes.
Yeah, exactly. So it's all about that learning process, which it adds credibility to your words, like you just said. It adds relatability and just adds interest too. So another tip for everyone to hold on to today. Now, Winifred, I'm wondering, do you have any other last thoughts to share with our audience today, either it be in the writing world or in the relationship realm as well?
Well, if I would really sum it up, the way the two of them overlap, both of them are acts of courage. Writing a book is a soul-searching, grueling process where you really have to dig deep into your authenticity. And being in a relationship calls upon us to be strong and clear and know who we are and be able to advocate for ourselves. And I just think that courage, we have to realize that in the face of things that are difficult, we actually have to keep going. I have a quote in my office, and I have this in the book, and it's from Winston Churchill, and it says, when you're going through hell, keep going. And I really think that the book writing process can feel like you're going through hell. And keep going. If you have something to say, keep going. If it's not coming out perfectly, keep going. You can revise, just keep going.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. I really appreciate that you shared that with us, because at the end of the day, that's, again, what it's all about, is keeping going, never giving up, and, just putting your best foot forward. I think that's one thing we can learn throughout
courageously. Yes.
Well, again, everybody, it's been an amazing conversation, Winifred. Thank you so much.
It's really been a pleasure.
Yeah, it's been eye-opening. It's been empowering. Your experiences as a therapist really does shine throughout everything you're saying. It's comforting, and there's a lot to learn from every word you say.
Yeah, I like to be encouraging. People can do it. Relationships are hard. You can do it. And you can feel good. Yeah.
And even more so, just your candor, your humility, and sharing these experiences within the book and also on my podcast today. It just helps everybody to really get immersed in what you're trying to say and understand it and perhaps implement it. So To our listeners, I encourage you to pick up Winifred's book, enjoy its wisdom, consider how you might be one to take lead in transforming your marriage as well, or your partnerships, your workplace relationships, whatever it might be. Because as Winifred has shown us, it only takes one to start that dance, as you can say. So until next time, this is the Authors on Mission podcast, reminding you that you have the power to write your own story as well, both on the page and in your relationships. And Winifred, thanks again for joining us. And
it's really been a delight. Thank you so much.
Awesome. And everybody else, keep writing, keep inspiring, and keep leading. Have a great day. This is Danielle Hutchinson reminding you that somewhere, someone needs the book that only you can write. Visit authorsonmission.com to start your legacy. Until next time, keep leading, keep inspiring, and keep thinking in chapters. Have a great day.